Hey guys, welcome back to the wood shop. So today we're going to be opening the Grizzly 18-inch open-end drum sander. So as you can see, the Grizzly 18-inch open-end drum sander came in this nicely packaged box on top of a crate. It seemed like it was secured well, so you got these little plastic bands that are holding it to the crate. It didn't seem like everything was inside of the package, but after we started poking around, we saw that the legs and all of the assembly hardware was tucked nicely underneath the bed. After we started to unwrap the legs, it became apparent that we'd spend a little bit more time than I had expected assembling the legs, mainly because the bolts and lock nuts were all threaded together. And each leg and joint has 4 bolts and lock nuts that go in. So after spending about 10 minutes loosening them, taking them all apart, things started to move quite smoothly. As you can see, we just laying them out, not even really looking at the manual here. There's only one direction that they can go. As you can see, my wife is over here helping me. She's got the tedious task of taking the bolts and nuts off of these little tiny, I think they're 10 mil bolts. But after you get a few of them started, it just seems to stand up by itself, and then you can just keep tightening away, making sure it's square, and you've got your bolt with a little square opening so it self-tightens. Putting some side rails on. As you can see, a lot of teamwork involved in this. And as you'll see in a short while, most of the items and tools in my shop need a wheel base. So I can either spend $120 and get the equipment, dolly carts from Grizzly or some other competitor, or I can go to Harbor Freight or anywhere that sells caster wheels and purchase 4 caster wheels for like less than $15 and build a cart out of some scrap wood that I have laying around. So that's typically the path that I take, and I've built about 4 of these, so I've become quite efficient. You just grab some scrap wood, get your rough measurement for your base, tack them together, hammer some screws into that thing, and then attach your caster wheels. And you can put caster wheels with locks if it's going to be something that you want to have a locking base, like my bandsaw or like the planer. But for the other tools, like something like a drum sander, I'm not going to be putting too much pressure on it, so I just went with a non-locking caster wheel. I thought this was kind of interesting. So when I do that, I clear it to run the oil through. If you're wondering why I'm hammering nails into my assembly table, that's just to clear the gun and run some oil through it so that everything's nice and lubricated before I go attaching my brad nails. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, like, why do we need a drum sander? And that's a really good question. The decision that we made to get this was we do a lot of live edge and thick slab work that you can't stick through a planer with a single phase electric system. So, we would need a 3-phase, and to do that would cost so much money. So the other option is to either hand sand or cut it in half, or maybe even to smaller sections and run it through the planer, then join it back together. And that, just even explaining it, sounds like a lot of work. So the other option is to get an open-end drum sander, and our max sanding size is now 3 feet. So most of the slabs that we work with are max, I think we've worked with, is 34 inches wide. So this will this will work. It'll fit within our shop and with some of the projects that we're working with right now. So we decided to get a drum sander, and so far it's actually paid itself off in time. I ran a 20-inch wide, 3-inch thick slab through it, and it took about an hour to get this thing, the warping and the roughness from the sawmill out of it. But I mean, after it was done, there was no dust in the air, and I mean, it was pretty smooth where I just had to run a 180 grit and work my way up to 320 on top of it. It didn't take but 2 hours to finish the whole entire slab, so I was very impressed with it. And as you can see here, we're just applying the caster wheels to the base of our cart, just using 1 5/8" deck screws to attach these. I'd say any kind of screw would work if you're going to make your own carts, just as long as it secures the wheel to the cart. Those caster wheels are rated for 200 pounds each, so this cart should be able to hold 800 pounds. The sander is about 220, if I'm not mistaken. And then with a workpiece on it, I wouldn't put it above 300, maybe 400 pounds max. So this cart should hold up nicely. The base of the legs didn't have any holes in them, so I just use a drill bit, put a little hole in there. Each one of the legs gets a 3-inch deck screw, which is just driven down into the top. And as you can see, voila, wheels nicely on the concrete floor. Now it's time for us to power lift this thing up here. As you can see, my wife's struggling a little bit. It's a little awkward. It's not necessarily that heavy, but it's very awkward to pick up. You don't want to grab the wrong things. But we got it up on the cart. Now it's a matter of putting 4 bolts in to secure it to the base, and then we'll be ready to wheel it into position.
Sweetheart. Oh, where you at? Here, let me see all the bolts and stuff.
I really appreciate that there's a threaded hole for the bolts to go in through the base, mounting it to the top. So you don't have to deal with nuts or anything upside down. It's just threading it into a hole and securing it to the base. And as you can see, that wheelie cart handles it nicely. Time to put the height adjustment wheel on. There's a little bolt and an Allen wrench. Allen wrench is supplied, which is nice. Go ahead and crank it all the way down, crank it up, make sure everything works. I always do my final inspection after opening something, just making sure that everything looks like it's in its place. Check the paint for chipping or bubbling, check the stickers for bubbling. As always, that nice Grizzly logo looks nice. This machine comes with a cord, so you don't need to do any electrical wiring or anything like that. I would like to offer one piece of advice and also criticism. I'm not sure if this machine is underpowered, but I kept popping the breaker. The owner's manual says to run your wood through and then turn 1/4 turn. So I did that, and it kept pinching the wheel and then stopping the wheel, and then the motor would then cut the breaker. So what I did is reduced my turns to 1/8 of a turn, and I popped the breaker again. So then I reduced my turns to 1/16 of a turn, and it seemed to work okay, but it still seemed to lag. Have you guys run into similar issues with this open-end drum sander? Maybe there's something else I need to do, possibly snipe or pinching. Anyways, other than that, it seemed to work pretty well.
So that about does it for the assembly video for our Grizzly 18-inch open-ended drum sander. 2 things I'd like to point out to you. The first is the dust collection port. There were like checkered lines. This is a thin plastic, so I just used my X-Acto knife to take those out so I wouldn't catch any chips. And then the other thing is I kept popping my fuse. This is I believe 15 amp, and I've got a 20 amp breaker. I realized that if you turn it more than 1/4 turn in between passes, if you're maximizing the space, you will pop the breaker. It must have some shut off in it. Anyways, other than that, it's worked out, saved a bunch of time already. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any comments, comment below. We always respond to the comments. Go ahead and like, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.